Brilliance Audio.
Everything Must Go by Camille Pagán. Performed by Amy Mcfadden and Laural Merlington. 1. Laine. In the end, the dog did us in. Josh and I might have stayed together if Belle hadn't died. She was nearly 15, which is about as long as a spaniel mix can live, and there was a constellation of cancer in her abdomen. The decision to put her down wasn't, really. It would have been cruel to try to keep her alive. For weeks after that final vet visit, I burst into tears whenever I thought of her. I was standing at the stove, sobbing over a pan of fajita chicken, Belle's favorite, when Josh sidled up to me and said, "She's a dog, Laine. I know it isn't fair, but they don't live forever." "Was, Josh," I sniffled. "She was a dog." Actually, she'd been something else entirely, a creature wise and otherworldly. To look into Belle's eyes was to gaze into the soul of the universe itself and be seen. Not that I would have described it that way to Josh, who'd loved Belle, but thought it was weird to call your pet your best friend. I'd once thought so too, but that was before I'd learned just how disappointing humans can be. A dog, on the other hand, never said terrible things you couldn't erase from your memory. "And of course, I know that," I told him. "I just miss her." I adopted Belle the year after I graduated from the University of Michigan. I'd decided to stay in Ann Arbor and had landed a job as an editorial assistant for a local magazine publisher. But after 6 months of employment, I'd deduced that I would never improve my command of the English language by fetching coffee for the perpetually hungover editor I'd been assigned to. And worse, the magazine's writers were making more than I was for much less work. I struck out as a freelance journalist and discovered that I'd been right about the money. And, as a bonus, I no longer had to worry about having a pencil thrown at me when I accidentally put too much cream in a cup of dark roast. Still, all of my college friends had left town, and I was lonely. On a whim, I went to the local animal shelter on my 23rd birthday. When I spotted a black and white runt huddling in the corner of the pen in an attempt to steer clear of her livelier siblings, it was love at first sight. Belle had immediately become my constant companion. She'd slept at my feet every night. Her wet nose had been my alarm clock each morning. If Josh and I traveled, Belle almost always came with us, which admittedly limited the type of trips we'd taken. Well, that and our anemic budget. When Josh had told me he still wasn't ready to try to have a baby last Christmas, even though he'd been saying next year for half a decade and was aware that my eggs were this close to their expiration date, I'd reassured myself that the timing wasn't good for Belle either, as it had become increasingly difficult for her to get around. She needed me. I'd just turned off the burner when it hit me. No one needed me anymore. And if I kept waiting around for Josh to decide he was ready to start a family, no one ever would. I wasn't going to pressure him, not about something as significant as whether to repopulate the earth with his own genetic material. He either wanted to or he didn't. And given the economy pack of prophylactics in the drawer of his bedside table, it was safe to say that he did not. I looked up at Josh. "I want a divorce." The flicker of surprise in his expression was gone as fast as it had appeared. "No, you don't. That's just the grief talking." This wasn't beyond the realm of possibility. Yes, I really wanted a baby, and I also knew, deep down, that perpetually putting it off was Josh's thinly veiled way of saying no. But was I willing to blow up our 12-year marriage over that? What would our family say? Josh and I had spent nearly our entire adult lives together. I stared at him, waiting to see if he'd at least ask if this was about us having kids. Instead, he shook his head and said, "This is nuts, Laine. You don't actually want a divorce. I can tell."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?